I'd just like to welcome everybody to this meeting of Children's over in Scrutiny. Just a few housekeeping notes before we start. Please note this meeting of Children's over in Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a maximum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everybody present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the chair. Always turn on your video function when invited to speak. State your name before you speak if you've not been introduced by name. Please mute your microphone when you are not talking. After the committee has heard from the presenting officers, the chairman will ask the committee members who wish to speak to do so by utilising the raise a hand function, the feature on the bar at the top of the Teams window. The messenger bar should only be used unless you're raising a point of order, providing wording for an amendment. At any point you would like to speak again, please raise your hand again, and please remember to lower it when you've really finished. The chair will ask each member in turn how they wish to vote if we have a vote. And finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible, and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the meeting. So start off with apologies. I don't believe there have been any apologies. Can I just double check?
No, there's no apologies for absence, Chair. Thank
you very much. And in that case, is no substitute members. Declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any local interest on the agenda? Okay, I can't see anybody making any comments, so I'm assuming not. So minutes of the last meeting. I hope you've all had a chance to have a look at the minutes. Can I just ask, are there any issues looking at the minutes of the last meeting? I'll just give people a moment just to, in case. No, in that case, I will take them as read. Action sheets. Just one point before we look at the action sheet. There was a further item on the agenda tonight, scheduled to be on tonight's agenda, about the Bournemouth Learning Centre, which we removed at the last minute. We'll be addressing this on the when we talk about the forward plan later, so I'll just reassure you on that. Are there any other issues to raise on the action sheet? I can't see any hands, and in that case, we will go on to item 5, public issues. Again, I don't think there've been any public issues on this one. Can I just confirm that, Louise?
Yeah, that's right. No public issues have been received.
Okay, so we come to the main item for tonight, which is the Children and Young People's Partnership Plan 2021 to 2024. I'm very pleased that we can spend this time looking at this partnership plan and having the opportunities to fulfil our role within the partnership. The committee, we received a report about this back in September, 22nd of September last year, which we had an interesting and I hope useful discussion. Personally, I found this paper very readable, and I could feel the influence of both this committee and officers in it. This is a draft plan. So we have the ability to influence it by maximising constructive engagement before completion of the plan and going to the Cabinet and full Council. I read that off the paper and I thought, yes, that's what we actually do here in Children's anyway. I'm pleased that Anthony Douglas has again joined us to help present this report, as well as Neil. Both of you were very welcome. I don't know who's going to start the presentation, but can I just remind the committee that this is actually a partnership board. It's not just BCP, it is a partnership. And I think, is it Anthony, are you going to start the presentation?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yes, good evening, councillors. I'll just start, I think, with 2 points about governance. The first is in relation to the status of the council and the other organisations. I thought I should make that clear as in my role as the independent chair of the partnership. And that's really that I think the council's probably in a position to support the plan, at least I hope you do, rather than to approve it. And I'll just sketch out the reasons for that. It's a partnership plan, and it is for each of the partners, police, health, the council, and some others, to influence this and to sign off their part of it, if you like, but not to, it can only be signed off together. In other words, it needs an agreement from every agency before it's publishable. And it may well be that's just a matter of wording, but I just thought I'd make that clear because we've tried to position it and express it so that it does represent the multi-agency system, of which the council is probably the most important partner because of its reach, both in terms of volume of services, budgets, and community links. The second point I'd make is on the impact assessment, which is not in the draft plan because our intention is to produce a series of short impact assessments in the summer when the outline plan's been hopefully agreed, so that we can produce an action plan that includes impact assessments, outcome statements, and so on. And just to give some examples of impact statements, we'll have a partnership equalities impact assessment, probably a child mental health impact assessment, a young carers impact assessment, and so on. Because if the plan is to mean anything, rather than just be a plan on paper, it has to make some difference, some improvements to particular groups of children and young people in BCP. And I think it's best to set those cohorts, groups of children and young people out in a little bit of detail to make clear that the plan refers to them too and is both ambitious but quite specific. For example, we have 458 known young carers in BCP. The youngest between 4, 5 and 6. You may find that incredible, and it is when you first hear it, but there are children that young actively supporting parents with disabilities and so on. Those are 458 known to us through different services, but there are almost certainly at least 100, possibly 200 more hidden in plain sight. It's not an issue that children talk about freely, sometimes because they just take it for granted. It's the way they live. But our plan has to say something about them to offer them more. And I'm very pleased it's built up for young carers in the last couple of years. Those need to improve and increase. So the impact assessments will look at the action plan and then both the positive assessments, positive impacts and the risks. And if I may, Chair, just turning briefly to the plan itself, it was shaped over the course of 3 to 6 months with a particular emphasis on working with children and young people themselves. It is populated with many quotes from children and young people, and that's because we wanted to aim it at every child and young person, from children perhaps with no problems whatsoever, as the vast majority are reporting, to those who have very significant difficulties and who need intensive support. So the general picture which you can see is that most of the consultees were young people, are positive. They very much like the area. They like the universities. They like the work opportunities. They like the beaches. And congratulations on that. I see Bournemouth Beach has just been named in the top 25 beaches in the world by TripAdvisor, the 5th best in Europe, and so on. So BCP is an attractive place to live and work. There are some concerns about whether young people have enough power and authority in the community In other words, whether it's sufficiently child-friendly. So the plan sets out your ambition to be a child-friendly city region with all that entails, and we hope to be publishing some more detail about that by the summer. And then young people report several difficulties: access to the housing market. These are probably obvious ones. Access to the housing market, concerns about mental health, transport links not being good enough for them, even though they are for some people, and the need for diversity to be recognised a little bit more strongly by civic society. And then in terms of events and the creative side, mixed views, but generally it's an incredibly positive picture. So when we turn to schools, because the partnership evolved from the earlier Education Learning Board, the picture with schools is pretty good. The majority of children go to good to outstanding schools, although many of those Ofsted grades are quite ancient now. And so without a reassessment, it's not possible to be too complacent about that. And we know there are some groups of children who have very substantial difficulties. The level of exclusions is high. The correlation with SEND and youth offending is high. The attainment levels are very, very mixed. The numbers of children out of school, not just during the pandemic, but that's increased the difficulty. I mentioned young carers, most are out of school. Now that isn't necessarily, that's probably a consequence of their roles at home, but we could probably have done more to support them, both with their education as well as their caring responsibilities. And then there are some other groups we know. Homeschooling has been fantastic for some, not for others, and some children have spent too long out of school, or they're on part-time timetables, and so on. So when you're looking at that complexity, you could write a plan of several hundred pages, but we decided to go for something shorter, more accessible, easier to read, so that, for example, our infographics about numbers try to put social difficulties in perspective. The quotes try to give a balance, and then also the basic statistics are there as the backdrop for the report, particularly those about students and about the health service. So this is not just an education document, not a social care document. It possibly doesn't have enough about the police and some other services. There are some pretty groundbreaking schemes run by the police and the council, particularly in relation to complex safeguarding, with some good recent results. So the action plan needs to find a way through all that and to do something added that doesn't duplicate what's there already, but adds some significant strategic value. And the advantage of the strategic value is through greater system leadership. So if a school is in trouble, if a college is in trouble, if any part of the council is in trouble, connected with children and young people, that the partnership brings some resources to it. An example would be to do more pre-exclusion work as a multi-agency group with school exclusions. So there are many opportunities to do that, and therefore the headings, just to finish, are fulfilled, happy, inclusive, included, and resilient. And we thought those were the areas that would guarantee some degree of impact on every child in BCP, roughly 117,000 children. Now, you can never reach all of those, but we'd like to reach all of those who want to be supported by the local public sector and its contractors. Anyway, I'll stop at that point, Chair. And then I think, if I'm right, Elaine is going to talk a little bit about another aspect of this, but we're in your hands.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Boring point just for people who are watching the live stream on this. I believe nobody can see me, so I just want to make sure that people know that I'm Councillor Richard Burton and I'm chairing the meeting, because I did say people should announce themselves, and nobody else can see me other than people in the committee, it seems. Can I just ask, Elaine, would you find it more beneficial to do your bit now and then have all the questions at the end?
I actually think that Anthony, Chair, has covered off the bits that I was going to talk to. So unless anybody's got any particular questions for me, I'm very happy to go with that suggestion, Chair.
Right. In that case, what I'll do is we'll come to questions, and then if anything's suitable for you to answer, Elaine, you could indicate and take it over. Thank you very much, Anthony. That was really interesting, and you actually covered my first question, talking about the Equalities Impact Assessment, which I'm very grateful for. I'll just say, I mean, my first comment isn't a question. It's just a comment which I noticed in the report. Reachable moments you mentioned in the report, and I'm very much aware that COVID has affected reachable moments tremendously, and my experience of children is sometimes these reachable moments are quite fleeting. So it's just a comment. Can I have a few other questions and comments, but I'll just ask the rest of the committee if they have anything to start with. Nathan, you just beat Felicity, so I'll come to you first, Nathan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say firstly that us as the Youth Parliament and as our BCP Youth Forum have looked over this report, and we thought it was presented really well and really accessible for young people. So we want to thank you on that. Some of the concerns that we had was on page 22, it talks about the immediate and short-term priorities of the plan. We liked and we agreed with the 4 words of fulfilled, happy, included and resilient. We thought that these were good and described what young people felt. However, we felt some of these priorities either didn't quite fit the words or could be better put in some of the other categories. For example, the second point in the fulfilled category about making sure that everyone could go back to school, we felt that might be better included in the included category. And we felt that some of the other priorities, such as the one for resilience, didn't quite fit what young people felt resilience described. So that was some of the concerns we had, and what you think could be done about that.
Well, perhaps, Nathan, I could come and meet with your colleague and just go through those in more depth and then amend the report accordingly.
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to do that with you. That'd be great.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anthony and Nathan, for that question. Felicity, you are next on my list.
Hi, hi everyone. Yes, thank you for the report. I wasn't on this committee when you last came to this committee, right at the beginning back in September. So this is my first sighting of it. So I have quite a lot of things to highlight, but I'd just like to start off with, just so that I can sort of frame myself. So this is a 3-year strategy. I'm really interested in sort of the development of relationships and families and adults and children together. And there's quite a lot of mention about parents struggling and that having an impact on children. Is there a plan for like a 10-year strategy plan as well in the pipeline?
Not at the moment, Councillor. I think we took the view that it was hard enough to predict the next year, let alone the next 10. But no, a serious point is you're absolutely right that you measure change over a generation. But I think because BCP is only 2 years almost old, then it was still, in my view, independently finding its feet, developing as a council, still developing its partnerships. And I do think 3 years probably is about right for the context. There are some organisations with 10-year, 20-year plans, especially in the private sector where you need to make major investment, and that won't be realised for a decade plus. But I think it's a compelling point, and probably important to have a corporate plan of that length first, that other plans like a children's plan draw from. But I haven't thought about it. Thanks for the question. And as we go through the next point, what I think we'll do is look at those objectives that do need a longer time to deliver, and perhaps then this could be the first 3 years of those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. You're quite happy with that?
Oh, well, it's given me something to think about.
Yeah. Just to be clear, it's as last time. I want 1 point per person, and we'll rotate round. So that's sort of fairer. Beverley, you are next.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'll introduce myself as Councillor Beverley Dunlop. First of all, I'd like to say I love the ambition in the plan. I like the way it's presented, the backdrop of people and place, so it creates almost a starting point. I like the positioning of the example of the 100 children. Gives a very nice picture of, you can see, you know, children that are directly affected, and when you multiply that up by the number of children, you can then realise that there is some work to be done. I like the way what it seeks to, it is my words, almost put a protective wall around each child, recognising that there is something that needs to be done for each child, and then particularly striving towards this interlinked partnership, because I know that seems to come back on a number of occasions as a problem of partnership, not partnership working. I love the statement, child-friendly place in every local community and postcode. I think that's a really, really big positive message. Now, my first question was actually going to be about the 4 priorities, but I would initially like to suggest that they're really ambitions, because you will develop those priorities, I think, from those 4 items. And it was to ask where they came from. But Mr. Douglas, I think you just said that you thought they were the areas they should focus on. That has come out of some work, presumably, that has given you those 4 ambitions. And I'd just like to know, I guess, how you have arrived at those 4. And then within that, just, I think the description of happy, I think that's probably, I think there probably is an adult's description rather than a child's description of what makes them happy, but really about how ambitions came into being, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor. Well, we consulted with as many children as we could, given COVID, the pressures and the capacity issue. And that was really the words we derived, those of us in a small group who were assembling it from the raw information, that those came out strongly as the majority of young people saying something about that. And I might beg to differ only about one thing with you, Councillor, which is that about happiness, because I do think priority. I take your point about ambition, but I think happiness is, it can either be seen as a bit naff and a bit stupid to write into policy documents, but actually, if you've had a happy childhood, you remember it as happy. And there are some distinct reasons for that. And I think that's, as you say, our ambition, but a priority. Conversely, if children are unhappy, and many we're working with are, for reasons you know only too well, then one of our tasks is to make them happier. And we might define that as, well, reducing the risks they face or strengthening their attachments. We might talk about it in all sorts of languages, getting them particular services. But in the end, we're trying to make them feel better. We're trying to give them more hope for the future. We're trying to equip them with tools to go forward, to be more resilient. So I'll take responsibility for that. It was drawing together the information we had there. There can always be more, and you can always choose other words, but they were the ones that came to mind. Inclusion was particularly strong because of quite blatantly there are some groups who are not included sufficiently. Resilience, I think everybody needs it these days, whether you're 0 or 100, because of what's going on. And then fulfilled, I think that that ambition, even though we might think of it as doing well at school, doing well at college, into work, having relationships, all of those, it's really, I think, by becoming fulfilled. So there was that. I think you had a second part to that. I may have missed because I've been pontificating about that too much.
No, I think making every child happy is a fine aspiration, and it's not written in the American Constitution for nothing, is it?
Indeed, it's what we want for our own children, and for the children we know through friends and so on. Yeah.
So I think it's fine. I think the sort of the sub point I made was how we've interpreted that as enjoying healthy lifestyles and making positive choices. Positive choices. It seems more of I guess an adult's interpretation of what being happy might be, rather than a child's definition of happiness. That was it. I think where just seems a bit of an overlay of. It's just a minor point, I think.
Yes, no, possibly.
Or of the children's view of happiness coming through.
I think possibly, but however, certainly over 5, 6, 7, that's what you're trying to do with your life. You're trying to edge towards a healthier lifestyle, and we know we've got lots of unhealthy lifestyles. But certainly by the teenage years, these are active choices being made by children who are the only ones who could do anything about it. My 4-year-old grandchild, I'm struggling to force him to do anything unless I convince him of it. So I think we're in an era when you have to carry people with you, however young they are, and they have to make that decision for themselves. You help them to make it.
That's lovely. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you very much. I mean, I would agree that happy children are much easier on the learning and their health, and it's quite difficult to define happiness. I think we can all define unhappiness, can't we? You can recognise an unhappy child much more than a happy child. Councillor Jane Kelly is next, but I know she's having some problems with her reception, so she might not be turning on her video. So I'm apologising on her behalf if you don't. Jane.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I'll leave it off if that's okay with you at the moment, just in case. I too loved reading this plan. Absolutely super the way it's presented, with the infographics, the pictures, the photographs of the children looking happy, and the way that the information is presented. Absolutely brilliant. Loved it. Thank you very much. I can see how much work and
thank you, Councillor.
And thought has really gone into this. In the actual document that is going with it, there's when we get to the different summaries of implications and the equality implication, and I know you spoke about the EQIs not happening until in depth until you get to your different plans being active when you start to action your plans. But this sentence here about it will be targeted at the disadvantaged. I'm not sure if that's disadvantaged. I don't think is an actual protected characteristic, and therefore I'm not sure if that is a good way of putting that.
Well, you're quite right. So I think we probably need to say protected characteristics and addressing inequalities.
That's the best one. Yes,
something like that.
That would be really fantastic. Thank you very much. That was my only query. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a nice, short and succinct one. Sandra, you're next on my list.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, yes, I enjoyed reading this as well, and I found that there's masses of information and it's got lots of numbers in it, and I know quite a few of my colleagues like their numbers, but it's written in a way that's interesting as well as being informative, and I'm pleased it's an ambitious plan, and I know we've got to be ambitious to drive improvement, and there's a huge amount of work that's gone into this, so thank you for that. What I liked was that you linked the high numbers of the exclusions with the 16 to 17-year-olds that are in care, linked in with early help and the complex safeguarding team, and all about the prevention work. I just wondered whether or not there should have been a bit more from the police on this bit, and also linked in with like youth work, because it's all, you know, goes together. And I also think I should have perhaps declared an interest in this as well, because I'm a trustee of Camford Heath Infant and Middle School Teacher Trust, and I think I should have said at the beginning, it's there's quite a bit of contributions from that school, lots of little drawings from that school, clever kids.
It looks like Anthony is frozen, doesn't it?
I think I've finished him off, haven't I?
It's either that or he's been very thoughtful about what you just said, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
We will we'll give him a moment.
Yeah.
I can take the feedback.
Yes,
If that's helpful.
Could you take over for a moment or two? And
yeah, absolutely happy to do that.
Right. If we just pause a moment to give Anthony a moment to rejoin us.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Do you want me to put my hand back up so that I can ask a further question when you've been round?
Yes, please. That would be very useful, because I do like to give everybody a chance and do it in order.
Oh, fair enough.
So.
Chair, Anthony's back in case you can't see him.
Oh yes, he's moved places. He's now. He was in the centre. He's now over the left. Welcome back, Anthony. Looks like you had some connection problems. So, welcome back, Anthony. Can you hear me? Okay, looks like he's back, but not. Yeah. Okay. I think that says it all, doesn't it? Elaine, are you able to?
Yes, I can take the feedback, and perhaps we can use the chat bar.
Okay.
Great.
Yes, I do apologise, Chair.
That's perfectly all right. We thought for a moment you've just been very thoughtful, but it seemed that not. So did you hear that point? Okay, or would you like it to?
Well, it was, I think, Sandra, unless I missed a subsequent point about more emphasis from the police and other agencies, particularly about working with teenagers. And
yeah, it was the police and youth work.
Yeah.
It was all linked together. Yeah.
No, you're right. We'll redraft that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa Northover, Councillor Lisa Northover, you are next on my list.
Hiya. Thank you. I wanted to ask about, got two screens and I was just trying to move things around on the wrong one. I wanted to ask about, in longer term priorities in the plan, there's some things on there that I feel like I recognise these things because I've seen them in other plans over the last probably 20 years. And I just wonder how we actually make some of these things really happen, because, for instance, apprenticeships has been something that has been talked about just for so long, but they're never available for young people that have not got 5 GCSEs. They're rarely available. If you look, it's sort of a solution that isn't true. It's sort of, people are told, oh, you could get an apprenticeship, but they can't if they haven't got reached that attainment. And similarly, I think they're about reducing exclusions. I think that's something I've seen so many times over really more than a decade. And I can think of a recent example of somebody who was nearly got to the point of being excluded for no real good reason. And there's in the school, just nothing to prevent, not even a real problem, just a problem with school, but not really a problem. A sort of somebody within the school who is just the member of staff that deals with this sort of thing. They didn't even have that, and it just feels to me like I see these things written in plans, but how do we this time have something more tangible that comes out of it?
No, I accept both those points, but and then just 2 quick responses about firstly apprenticeship, then exclusions. In the Children's Services Improvement Programme, apprenticeships for care leavers is an improvement priority. Now, of course, that's not all children, but it's a good place to start because there are around 120 care leavers, and as you say, a good number would struggle to make the entry barrier for an apprenticeship and need a lot of support. But that particular work programme is being led by the chief executive in the improvement programme, and certainly the ambition is for the council itself to take a leadership role in it and to support those care leavers into in-house apprenticeships, and then by working with other companies and with 1 or 2 grant-making foundations we're talking to try to extend those opportunities more broadly. So it needs a detailed programme. It needs to be run through exercises of buy-in, and it needs a lot of project management. But I think just because something hasn't happened before doesn't mean we shouldn't try it again and to try and do it better this time. On school exclusions, I agree completely. You can look at some schools who never exclude and others who do. And you look at some young people who are incredibly difficult to look after with challenging behaviour, and they need a clear multi-agency service and often more specialist support than they're getting. But there are others who shouldn't be excluded. So we're looking to try to strike an agreement with all 96 schools that the goal is to reduce exclusions to the irreducible minimum. You can never really say 0, but certainly a number of local systems have managed to do that. And that will take place over 2 to 3 years. It doesn't happen overnight. And we also think that possibly to have a multi as a compulsory pre-exclusion meeting, that because the consequences for an exclusion are often become matters for other services like the police or the health service. So I think it's important they're part of the decision making with the school, and to offer the school as much as we can through the expanded team around the schoolwork, so that they have as much support as anybody could give them. And I do think schools have got an appetite at the moment for working together, perhaps more strongly than a year or 2 ago. I think COVID and all that's happened has made people slightly more interdependent and to recognise their dependency on each other. And I think that's something to build on. But as you say, it won't be easy. And the proof of the pudding is in tracking the numbers over time.
I am glad to see these things again, and that there's perseverance. So thank you.
Okay,
Councillor.
Further Thank you, Lisa. Now, Felicity, you're next, but I have noticed that Councillor Nicola Green has raised her hand and as a portfolio holder to add to that, Nicola.
No, it was a slightly different point, actually.
Right. Okay. And in that case, I'll come to you in turn then, as it were.
I have already been, so
yeah, you have.
I'm
okay.
quite happy for you to have somebody else first.
Yeah, well, the only person who hasn't been is Councillor Lisa Lewis. So if I come to Lisa next, and then go to the other two people with their hands up.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Well, I'm sorry, I was actually out of the meeting for 10 minutes where my Wi-Fi seemed to pack up for good, and I have had to come next door. So this might have been covered already. I was just a little bit concerned on page 43, where it's got the sort of in 100 children, this would have, so it's a 24 would have experienced some form of bullying in the last 6 months, and did seem to me to be fairly high, but you know, I haven't been in school for a while. I just remember when I was teaching at St Peter's, we had about 20 years ago, we had sort of notices up everywhere about, are you experiencing bullying? Come to see somebody about it. I just wondered, you know, what was being done to help the situation, because it can be so upsetting for kids, can't it?
Indeed, Councillor Lewis. Well, I think there are already lots of anti-bullying programs, as you know, and there's legality behind it. So what we can do as a partnership, I think that distinguishes the partnership from the other governance structures, because we're asking the question, what can the multi-agency teams do about these issues like bullying? But we'll have to drill down into the data more, a bit like we started to do with exclusions, to understand exactly. I mean, there are many types of bullying, as you know, and one aspect of this is that the definition has got wider, which is more helpful, because being controlled, being over controlled, being scapegoated, there are lots of bullying activities that were perhaps just taken for granted 15, 20 years ago. So I think we need to drill down into the data, look at the incidents either in a cluster of geography or a cluster of places, and then to target the interventions. Having looked at the interventions now, to look at what's been successful and what hasn't. So I think this is a good example of needing to do more detailed work by the summer.
And you can have, of course, online bullying now, and it's sort of getting the children to actually admit that they're being bullied as well, isn't it?
Indeed.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So, Felicity, you are now next.
Okay, thank you. One technical point. On page 43 in the infographics, it says that one child would be living with a family with abuse. I'll get up the document.
One will be living with parents where domestic abuse, substance misuse, or mental health concerns impact on their daily lives.
Yes, but then earlier on in the document, it suggests that 11,400 children with parental substance misuse, mental ill health, or domestic abuse, and that would make it 10 in 100 children.
Yes, I'll need to take that away and look at the data in more. But yeah, yes, if you can't have, it's either 1 or it's 11. So thanks for pointing that out.
And obviously, if it is the 10%, that's huge. Absolutely huge, and the systemic problems that we have as a society is enormous. Okay, that would be really helpful to. Well, yeah. It's just,
we may
really
be
helpful.
talking about slightly different cohorts. That's what I think probably has happened, that one is children known and one is a projection of the likely incidents, but I'll take it away and make sure it's grounded.
Either way, I would be I don't know whether I'd be surprised at the 10%, but you would have more expertise. I would like to go to page 34, and there's some comments about the economy. I don't know whether you've read Donut Economics. Have you read Donut Economics?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
And I've trained as an economist. That's really pathetic.
Well, it's a relatively new book out, maybe 7 or 8 years or something. But a lot of councils are now talking about it. Some European cities are talking about it now. And let me just find the sentence that I wanted to highlight. So it says key to delivering this plan is a strong economy with high levels of employment of local residents who are skilled and productive, and an emphasis that the economic development strategy will support the delivery of our vision. And so the Donut Economics talks about how actually the economy is just a facilitation tool. So it should support what we want to have happened, whereas I felt this statement suggested that as long as we have a strong economy, then children will be happy. So that is a suggestion that's, I suppose, part of the issue that we have in the UK and globally is that we measure GDP as for our economy, and there certainly isn't any proof that if you have my understanding is that there wasn't a strong correlation between a high GDP and child happiness. So possibly a rewording around that about how the economy should be designed to support child happiness, rather than an assumption that if you have a strong economy, you get child happiness. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Well, I think it's a part explanation. Clearly there's a positive impact of work and a strong economy, but I take your point.
Yeah, rewarding work, absolutely. But I suppose it links into also inequalities in wealth that we particularly have in this country, whereby we in this area we have potentials, but then we also have the extremes of poverty. So the area may have high GDP and classify it as a strong economy because we mostly just measure the GDP. But there's increasing evidence that that inequality to extremes is not helpful for anyone, and certainly not helpful for child happiness. So it's just, I suppose, understanding that it's not just as GDP. And I would personally like to see an emphasis that that assumption is moved away from now.
Yes, I mean, the emphasis is on just improving the life chances of those who are particularly disadvantaged, and to help prepare them for, and that's why the college is such a strong, the colleges are such strong partners to help to prepare them, whether it's for apprenticeships, whatever it might be, that we really focus and concentrate on the group who do need more support to become happy, productive and creative adults. I mean, BCP's got lots of startups. I've been amazed by how thriving certain parts of the local economy are, and I think the point will be that these attracting inward investment and national developments, there is a local workforce ready to take up those opportunities, and that the best of young people don't emigrate, and that when somebody needs 15 people with a particular skill set, it's here. But that's a broader objective. But there's a lot of work being done with business, the local enterprise council on some aspects of that, to link also into school and college improvement. But I'll make sure that the final wording is donut economics proofed.
And is there anything in the long-term priorities about looking at measuring the economy in other ways than just GDP? So
I think that's probably outside the scope of the children's plan. And that probably gets us more into the regeneration and corporate planning territory.
right.
I say that as a former chief exec, but I've learned over the years, if it's about children, keep it at that level and don't try and do too much, because as I think Councillor Northover said, it's hard enough to make a difference to children. But I will read the book and take your point and try and improve.
That'd be lovely to hear back once you've read it.
I will email you.
Thank you for those questions and answers. Councillor Beverley, Dunlop, you're next, but I just wanted to pick up one thing that actually was discussed there, which was the bit about parental substance abuse, mental health, and domestic abuse, and to a certain extent, Anthony, you've answered what I was going to say, not about adults, but it just, when I read it, and I can see it's been very carefully worded, because I've read it several times and sort of mauled with it, but it says parental substance abuse, mental ill health and domestic abuse. The mental ill health to me stands out slightly, like you could be blaming people with a mental health problem for a problem with the children. Now I can see exactly what it means, and it does say mental ill health rather than anything else. I'll just, could any way it be softened to make it so it doesn't look like mental health is being blamed?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. No, you're quite right.
Thank you. Councillor Beverley Dunlop. Beverley, you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm slightly at odds with Councillor Rice, actually, because if you look at page 17 to me is giving you the high level of all the things that need to be addressed, we need to focus on, we need to improve, we need to do something about, we need to do something, that's a better phrase. And if you look at all those particular issues, if you were to overlay socio-economic situation across all of those, and bear in mind socio-economic is one of our adopted protected characteristics, you will identify that socio-economic has a huge impact on all of these things. And when you put those into the equation, you see how important a strong economy and economic development is, because if people can improve their financial situation, it reflects on all these issues. So whatever the wording is fine, but I strongly disagree that there isn't an economic influence on a lot of these, because it's been proven time and time again there is. And coming back to this page 17, which is showing about what the impacts are on these 100 children, if you just roll up some of these numbers, you're talking about 28,000 children who have experienced bullying, 17,500 with special needs or a disability, 13,000 in poverty, 13,000 absent from school, 1,200 kids will pitch up in youth justice, 6,000 repeats. Those are somebody got their microphone not muted. Those are some really, really big numbers. And those are the things that we absolutely have to start to work up a plan to address. So my convoluted question is, are we going to see these coming through as separate pieces of work of how we're going to address some of these situations? Because we can't just say, 6,000 children are young carers. There are support mechanisms that we may already have in place, but we need to improve. So this to me is a list of improvements.
Yes, I mean, you're right, the numbers are considerable, and the action plan, I did think we would probably cluster it by the particular cohort of children and young people. I think that will, in a way, that makes it clearer who we're talking about and what the programs would be to address the issues you've talked about. So whether it's a reading gap, a particular group who are new to BCP and disoriented, like many children from abroad who come, care experience, young people, care leavers, the children who, as you've seen, are affected by domestic abuse. 15 years ago, we didn't realise that everybody was affected. We said, well, are you directly affected or not? But actually, we know that just about 92% of children in a household with domestic abuse are affected quite considerably, sometimes for life. So I think we will need to do something quite specific about specific groups. And that's our task over the next few months.
Thank you very much. So you've got your hand up. Is that still from before?
No, it was new. But did Fizz want to come back on what the previous point, perhaps first?
Well, Fizz has got her hand up. Yes. You, Lisa, first, and then we'll come back to Fizz in a moment, if that's a.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. I just wanted to ask for a bit of clarification, please, because on page 56, under the happy section, firstly, it's got that children and young people are asked about the skills and subjects they would be interested in learning, and that is taken into consideration when curriculum is developed. And then in the included column, it's got about more diverse, collaborative, blended learning from 13+ to improve outcomes, etc. And I wondered, does this mean that the curriculum would actually be altered in academy schools to fit in with what the children and young people would like to learn about? Because that would be wonderful.
No, I don't. Well, that's probably a bridge too far.
Right.
It would be great, but it's obviously so prescribed, and there are a lot of multi-academy trusts, a lot of single academy trusts in BCP after academisation, and we're trying to get some broad agreements. But I think if there was an issue that needed to go into certain elements of the curriculum, we could try to negotiate that. But no, I think that has to remain untouched and a matter for the academy as a national prescription. Okay,
I know that is a shame, because many teenagers, wanting to do certain subjects and being forced into sciences and that sort of thing, which wasn't their particular strength. Okay.
I think we're duty bound in the partnership if we hear of anything like that.
Right.
In other words, there are groups of children and young people who are being starved of a subject or starved of learning, then that's a legitimate issue to pick up.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to have to forced into doing science, all of it, but just my personal opinion. For Felicity.
Yeah, great. I just wanted to come back to Beverley. I'm not very good at explaining it because obviously I completely agree with you in terms of jobs being essential. It's just this understanding that, for example, if a supermarket is owned by a national chain and they create 10 jobs, but 50% of the profit goes away to the national head office, then that's different from a supermarket being owned by a local business and local people that employ, maybe generally give a better salary and have all of the community benefits of that wealth staying locally. So in both situations, the GDP would be the same, but you get a whole load of social benefits with one measurement that we don't generally measure with GDP. And so it's understanding that there's GDP is in our economies generally, but jobs, yeah, definitely. So another point I wanted to also just raise, it sort of links in, is on page 10, I think. I'm just going to get up the page, sorry. Deprivation. It does mention that wealth is not evenly spread and significant inequalities and pockets of deprivation exist, given their strong association association between deprivation and poorer outcomes. So completely agree with all of that. Maybe it's too much, but there's another book, The Spirit Level, talking the issues of income inequality. So where you've got, so completely separate from deprivation, if you have an area that is completely deprived, then you don't get the social inequalities of having one area that is deprived and one area that is wealthy. And there's increasing evidence about that wealth inequality, which is separate from deprivation issues and poverty. And it's not something that's generally spoken about very much, but a lot of evidence coming out now about the differences in terms of that. And in the in Poole and Bournemouth, we have a big issue, and a lot of areas within the UK, a big issue now with increasing gaps between the wealth and the poverty, and that gap itself is an issue separate from the poverty. And so it's just something that could be measured or looked at. If we don't even mention it, then it could become more of an issue because we're not even thinking about it.
Yeah, a bit more work to do to coordinate the data that different organisations have got at ward level. And for example, the Early Help Service is beginning to do that. And I think to target the ward level that is in detail and to break down what poverty and deprivation means there for children and young people, I think that's our direction of travel, to make sure that prevention goes to the right children and families. I would just say on, if I may quickly, Chairman, about business and national business, that some of the best schemes for care leavers do come from national organisations. There are some organisations for whom, for example, Sainsbury's offers a tremendous number of apprenticeships for care leavers, including preparation. And one of the first questions they ask is, will the young person still be with us in 20 years' time? Because they think if they want to invest in someone, that it needs to be for a long time. So I do think we've got further to go in relation to creating opportunities with local business, including national business in BCP.
Okay. Thank you much for that answer. I didn't think Children's Services would end up talking about economics quite so detailed here today. Nicola, I noticed you had your hand up for a while ago and it went down and it's gone up again. Is it the point now for you to come in before I come back to Beverley?
Chairman, it's just a general point, so it might come in on the wrapping up. I just wanted to say that I have another hat as the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board and to make that comment. So very happy to do that with your summing up.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Beverley, back to you.
Okay, I think that having listened to everything I've heard tonight, I really do get a wonderful sense that there's this absolute desire and will and aspiration to really improve the lives of our children. And as I said earlier, I think wanting them all to be happy is a very fine aspiration. There's just one other thing that I'd like to just throw into the debate, because we've talked about these out of these 100 children, all the situation they're finding themselves in, and that's just about building some links that are more than tenuous around things like our youth justice plan and around, Mr. Douglas mentioned domestic abuse, the links into those strategies. We talked about Northover mentioned apprenticeship. Just really looking at what we can do to build some more tangible links to business, and it's probably going to be working through other portfolios to make sure they're all built in the background so that we can all get there and achieve all the aspirations in this plan.
Thank you. Yep.
Councillor Jane Kelly. Jane, I think you're the last person with a hand up now.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, actually, I wanted to, first of all, can I say I've really enjoyed having the opportunity and to to make constructive criticism on this paper and this document, because it's great that we are feeling the consultation that you're doing with us is worthwhile, and actually you're listening and making some really and insightful comments. So thank you for that, Anthony. I wanted to mention when Councillor Rice was talking about the businesses, I was going to agree with you that national businesses, nearly all the supermarkets offer fantastic things with their corporate responsibility schemes, and they are often in a better position to do that than local businesses and smaller ones. So I know that, you know, there's swings and roundabouts, aren't they? But I didn't want national businesses to be all denigrated too much. And also when we're talking about deprivation in the BCP area, I think partnership working, which we're doing already here, obviously, is really important, and also with other areas of the council, because I've been with the communities officers team for many years now, or several years, and we've done so much work about our areas of deprivation. I've been in Bournemouth for the Legacy Council, but I know that in Poole as well that's been happening. So we already do have quite a depth of knowledge about that, and it would be really good for us to work together in some ways, because, you know, the children of those areas need as much help as we can give them, which is what you're about doing this plan, I know, because they're the future, aren't they, in the areas. So, you know, maybe there's some work we can do together for the different departments. Thank you.
Yes, well, I very much hope so, Councillor Kelly, and this is certainly a corporately shaped and owned plan. Yeah. And in the response to the Children's Services Improvement requirement, school improvement, SEND, all of these issues for children has been really strong across the council and corporately, and across political groups. Yes. And I think that's really worth highlighting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've just got two little things for the end. One thing I read a bit about the a village bringing up a child quote in there, and I looked it up, and the next bit where it actually came from, it talks about an African term, Noa Ora, which means child of the community, which I felt was really poignant to this. One little thing we're looking about how we can look at this in the future, and what other site we can have. It talks on page 31 of your report, 57 of our paper, I believe, developing a dashboard to look at how things to measure the improvement. Would it be possible for us to get some feedback from that dashboard in the future to see how the improvement has been measured?
Yes, indeed. It would be, I think, one of the first in the country. I know Leeds and one or two other child-friendly areas that have done it. We were trying to do it for the turn of this year, but COVID rather savaged the public health side of it, understandably. But there's a lot of information. We wanted to try to bring it together to a partnership dashboard that told a strong story. So it may take a little while to develop, but yes, certainly that's the intention.
All right, thank you very much. You're just going to excuse me, my phone is ringing. It will stop in a moment. Fortunately, you can't turn off home phones. You can turn off your mobile, but I've failed to find out how you actually can turn off your home phone.
Just unplug it at the root.
Yeah, cut the wire, I think, is the way to go. It's only probably trying something to sell me, because that's whoever phone's on the home phone. Right, well, it just relates me to sum up, because it's been quite a discussion, and I've made quite a few notes here, and please forgive me if I miss any of the important bits. I mean, we've all really enjoyed this. We've enjoyed reading it. We've found it a fascinating document, and we've been very grateful for being allowed to make the input into it that we have. We've talked a lot about the 4 words and the 3-year plan. how the young people look at those words, and you've agreed to talk to them about those. And we've talked quite a lot about happiness as well, in a couple of times, what the word happiness means and how to achieve happiness within children. We've looked at including protected characteristics in the policy. We've looked at apprenticeship. We talked about apprenticeships and inclusion improvement. And quite a lot about the numbers involved here. We like the graphics to say to show number of children 100, but also we also like we found it sobering to look how we multiply those numbers up. We had a great discussion about economics and GDP and income and happiness, which we've all promised to read another book, it seems. And links to other strategies. I think that probably sums up everything we talked about. In that case, we are. Nicola, did you have something else to add into that summary?
Thank you, Chairman. It was just briefly to note that as Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, all these, and I think that's been picked up quite clearly through comments from your members. And to say that the Health and Wellbeing Board will be looking at this. I'm not sure if we'll have a formal agenda meeting on it, but it is certainly something that Health and Wellbeing, and of course that's a partnership board as well, members will be responsible for delivering some of these as police and as health partners at that board. So to make it clear to you that I will be taking forward the importance of this strategy and, using it as a real statement of what our intentions are about children and young people once adopted.
All right, thank you very much for that. So we come to item 7 on the agenda now, which is the COVID and Children's Services. Now Elaine and yourself, Nicola, are going to do an input into this. I talked to Elaine earlier and we decided that Elaine was going to go first. The only reason is because her input is quite factual and there's not going to be many questions she can answer on that, whereas you, Nicola, might be able to answer a few questions on your input, and I know Elaine's is quite short. So if you're okay with that, over to you, Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. So it was an update on the change in landscape for education. You will know that the announcement's been made for all schools to return on the 8th of March. It is a very dynamic situation, which is why I'm not able to furnish questions. But what I can tell you is that we are working with our head colleagues around how they are going to manage the return for primary schools and obviously secondary schools, higher education, childcare and childminders, and further education. The challenge for the secondary schools is very different to the primary schools. The secondary schools are going to be required to undertake an absolutely logistic challenge on testing. And I'm sure you'll have many queries about this, and I'm very happy to take emails from you when you've had time to absorb what I'm saying, but also to follow the daily updates that are coming out through the Department of Education if you're interested in the web link. And I can send around some shorthand for you, but quite frankly, it's mountains of information, and I am struggling to interpret it along with my very, very seasoned head colleagues. So the long and short of it around the testing for the secondary schools is that it will, they have finally agreed today that the schools can start to test a week in advance of the return, so that's next week. There will be a requirement for 4 tests, 3 on school, 1 at home, and then they will move to twice weekly at home. And and that will stay in place for at least until the next 3 weeks. And face coverings, all of this is voluntary, may I just add, and face coverings to be worn in secondary schools while pupils are moving around. They are talking about a particular test for our children with special educational needs. It's a saliva-based test, my medical knowledge is not good enough for me to be able to give you the full details of it, but that is what they are looking at. So obviously it will be easier for the children, more comfortable for the children, but also easier for the adults or the carers that have to administer it. So clinically extremely vulnerable groups will still be asked to. You'll probably know that the criteria for that group has changed too. So we're not, at this moment in time, we're not fully sighted on the impact of that for schools in terms of teachers. Pupils is easier because we've obviously been through 3 lockdowns, and so that landscape and those pupils are known very well by the schools and by the local authority. So the only bit that you can expect to see, as I understand, that's been announced tomorrow, is the position on exams. So if I do get information that I feel I can forward to you directly, because it will be poignant to what you're going to want to know about exams, then if you're comfortable with this, Chair, I will just email you as a committee and give you the link. If it becomes more complicated, which I suspect it will do, then I will take some time and put a short briefing together so that you can understand the implications of it. But as I say, there are amounts of information. So, logistical challenge, transport, school transport. I'm obviously thinking about that. What does that mean for children that will need to travel, particularly if you've got a young person that has tested positive? But the overriding message from Public Health England, and I'm sure Nicola or Councillor Green will want to talk a bit about this when she gives the COVID update, is that this is only one piece of mitigation. The hands, face and space and the other measures of social distancing are equally, if not more important than. And I think there is a temptation to think that if we test, then that means that we will have a false sense of security. So it's part of rather than the solution to. The biggest challenge for us in the local authority is parental confidence. And we are working with our public health colleagues around that messaging, and I know that Councillor Green's involved in the corporate incident management team meetings that we have twice a week, where we do pay particular attention to the changing landscape, but then how we are going to support the residents with understanding the implications of that. So I'm not underestimating, and I'm not expecting a full return from the 8th of March, and we will not be entertaining any adversarial process. The council needs to be really proud of its reputation, where we have not entered into any adversarial conversations with our parents. We work with our parents when they are particularly concerned about their children or their young people going back into school, and we will continue to do that. So that's really it, Chair, at this moment in time. I could do all kinds of speculation, I'm sure all of you could, but I think it's terribly unhelpful, although it's tempting. So if it's acceptable to you, I will send the links as appropriate. I will put a briefing note together once I know the implications around exams, because I suspect that will not be straightforward, committee members. So if you're happy to leave that with me, then that's a task that I'm more than happy to serve you with.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree. Speculation is definitely not helpful in any way. And yes, we receive links, and I'm sure the rest of the committee will be, because I know we're all very interested and would like to keep abreast of the news as it comes in. And I also share very much your worries about testing, especially in secondary schools, because having experience of working in secondary schools, I know how difficult it is going to be to manage and the speculation that will happen, because schools are the best at speculating, children are anyway. But thank you very much for that report, Elaine. Nicola, over to you for a moment.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. It's been quite interesting to find out Anthony's background as an economist, yours as a science teacher, And I think the approach that I've taken might give away that my degree was in history, because when I saw the words COVID Nicola update, I took it as an essay question. Not the approach of giving you 4 long answers within 3 hours, but I did sort of start to think about what the issues were, and clearly I'm at the disposal of the committee. I'm very interested in anything you'd like me to provide, but I did take away and do a bit of really sort of cast my eye around some of the issues which seems to have emerged for children and young people through COVID. So I've tried to put them together in some notes, which I will refer to. But I thought it might be quite helpful just to reflect on some of the comments made by Ofsted. They did some field work through September, and they were looking at obviously social care settings at early years and at schools, and their overall conclusions I thought were quite helpful. This is more about really the start of a conversation and raising some questions. So when the chairman asked me, he said he hadn't intended to give me too much work. I think actually I might be throwing quite a lot back your way, but it was really just to give a bit of context about what we know and what we're finding out about the impact of COVID on children. And actually, you've already got quite a lot of this. It's a large part of it is common sense, and actually, a little bit of apply some critical thinking and some empathy to get there. And I think you will arrive at many of the same questions and the same views. And then it's clearly up to you as a panel as to how you'd like to take this forward. But the really interesting thing was summed up by Ofsted, and it's just a little bit that I'll read to you, if I may. And this was talking, as I say, at the back end of last year, but we have no reason to think that things are any different now. That children and learners have slipped back in their learning to varying degrees since the first national lockdown in March. Some have coped well in the face of restrictions, while others have been particularly hard hit, largely because of the interplay between their circumstances and the impact of the pandemic. Inspectors found children's experiences weren't necessarily determined by privilege or deprivation. Rather, those who are coping well have good support structures around them and have benefited from quality time spent with families and carers. And this includes children from all backgrounds, including those within the care system, some of whom saw relationships with carers improve. However, among children who were greatly impacted by school closures and other restrictions, basic skills and learning have regressed. For example, some children whose parents were unable to work more flexibly and who experienced less time with parents and other children have lapsed back into nappies, while others have forgotten how to eat with a knife and fork or lost their early progress in numbers and words. So that's it's quite chilling to know that that's the view of Ofsted on our children across the country, and I think we've got no reason to think that we wouldn't find similar things across BCP. Now, with the return to school, clearly those children and the ones that I know Councillor Moore and I have been concerned about for a long time, based on the we don't know what we don't know. Those children become more visible to us again when they go back to school. And something that I picked up from the regional inspector, lead inspector for Ofsted earlier in the year, he's been doing a lot of work with head teachers, and everybody acknowledges that the protective factor for the whole family of having one child in school is absolutely huge. It's the visibility, it's the universality, and all that other, going back to the chairman's point about it takes a village to raise a child, the village needs to see the child. And I think we will all be a lot happier when we know where our children are, notwithstanding their own well-being. It will be quite a significant moment. And then I just wanted, if I may, I'm very happy to answer any questions insofar as I can, but I have been in touch with the Director of Public Health, and the issues that they are raising. There's been a Scottish piece of research done recently, and it picks up clearly and unsurprisingly on some of the same things that Ofsted are finding. But there could have been quite a lot of underreporting on the impacts of maternal mental health. So here particularly we're looking at, mothers of very young children. So we need to, do our best to make sure that they are cited. And that the offer to families of preschool children have been stepped up and stepped down. And this goes back to that disruption of services, whereas we know that the continuity, the same person only telling you your tale once, people having the current information, is incredibly important for actually particularly sufferers from challenges of around their mental health of all ages, but particularly for maternal and young children. That children and young people who are already experiencing emotional health and wellbeing difficulties are more likely to have greater needs as this comes out. And they may well have particularly suffered from the challenges of home learning and access to quiet space, and indeed outdoor space, because there has been a decrease in children's physical activity. There's also a question which we will be needing to ask, is the impact of long COVID on children and young people. And going back again to something that this panel has cited on, some of those will be carers of people who are suffering from long COVID, as well as possibly having suffering from it themselves. And of course, there's a potential impact there on the education, health and care plans. One positive thing that has come out from the an ONS survey is that the impact on emotional health and well-being in 16 to 19-year-olds, we're quite right to be concerned about it, but actually it was the lowest, the impact was lowest compared with other adult age groups. Now, of course, there is a question about whether we're treating them as young people properly in comparing them with other adults, but it is interesting to note that there are some comparators that have been looked into. And interesting, again, this is coming out from the ONS, and very interesting conversation earlier on, led by Councillor Rice, about the economy and where that fits here. Is a point from, as I say, from ONS, that it is vital to support children and young people within the economic recovery and local delivery plans. So, Gemma, I think the note that I put to my myself there is that the golden thread here is one of inequalities and gaps. They are not straightforward ones of deprivation, although clearly that is a very significant one, and we need to keep our eye on that. And that goes back to something that work that we're pushing forward through the Health and Wellbeing Board. There was a comment again from an Ofsted report that I thought summed it up really well, and this was talking about children with special educational needs and disabilities and how they've been impacted by the lack of routine and wider community support, on which those informal caring relationships are very, very important. What Ofsted said was the state of the relationship between families, services and practitioners before March 2020 impacted on the effectiveness of the support that family received during the restrictions. If the relationships were good and working well, support was more likely to continue and to be adapted very well to families' needs. So what that tells us is that those families continue to receive some excellent support. What it also tells us is where those relationships weren't good or where they weren't embedded, the inverse happens, and those families will have been impacted negatively. And this panel obviously is well cited on the SEND Improvement Board, but I think it's quite interesting to see that through the lens of COVID as well. So sorry, it was a bit of an essay response, but I'm happy to go on to multiple choice questions afterwards if that would be helpful to speed things up.
Thank you very much, Nicola. That's very, very useful. I would totally agree, and what I'm pulling for this myself it is equalities, but these equalities are complex equalities, not as simple as and not knowing what we don't know is yes another big issue, but we're hoping that we will know very quickly when the children are seen again, and that's my big hope. Councillor Susan Phillips. Susan, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned before, Councillor Burton and Nicola, 2 points. You mentioned difficulties with returning in March that the schools will be confronted with. There's talk currently, and I'm sure Nicola and yourself know, that they're asking for and intimating that summer schools for children, in order for them to catch up with the lost months that have gone by, is on the horizon and a wish. But the thing I was going to say was that how does 6 weeks holiday versus a year loss of education equate to the mental health that we're talking about and the pressures on the teachers? I just wondered, Nicola and Councillor Burton and even Councillor Moore, if you could sort of bring to the table for me this confusion I've got of the ambition for March, and yet now we're looking at the summer holiday and the impact on their mental health, because they haven't actually settled back fully, and then they're going to be given another task, something very different yet again. So could I leave it at that before I complicate, because I think you've picked up probably on what I'm trying to say.
If I can add in on there, I think, because I know Elaine's got her hand up, I think she put her hand up before this, but I know Elaine will have an opinion on this as well. So Nicola, I think I interrupted you then. What were you going to be?
I was just going to comment to Councillor Phillips that I was asked about this on a local radio station the first thing this morning, and I did, I'm afraid, sort of slightly chuckle and say I'm afraid the words for that is an emerging position in terms of the response to the summer catch-up. Elaine, I'm sure, will come in and give a more detailed response, but it is something which is still being talked about, and we've yet to find out what the impact is. In terms of your point about holidays, of course, children go back on the 8th of March for a very short period again, 2 or 3 weeks, and then there's a fortnight Easter break. Actually, one thing that I do think we need to get back is for them, understanding the rhythm of the school year, and throwing further, barriers in their way may not necessarily help. That's not to say there shouldn't be the opportunity for some catch up, but I do think the sooner we are back to something which we all understand, the sooner the children will have the opportunity to feel part of that.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green, as well. Elaine, you have your hand up. I think you've got 2 things to talk about now.
Just thank you, Councillor Green. It does. Councillor Green and I have been having conversations of this way before it became the issue that it is now starting to do. Councillor, I don't know if this will give you any assurance, but I did have I visited 2 schools over the last 2 days, and with some officials from the Cabinet Office, and I can say with absolute clarity that we were clear that BCP will be led by what the children need in terms of the response, and that was supported by the head teachers that I was with, and that however they want to define catch up, that is an option. It doesn't necessarily mean, as Councillor Green's inviting, that is the path that I'm going to be recommending that we follow. But I wish to offer you some assurance that we will not be having academia-led response to getting ready for September, and that's the longevity that we need to have our eye on. Very short, 3 weeks, then Easter, then summer holidays, and then we need to be ready, don't we, for our academic year in September. So I think this will be a conversation ongoing, as Councillor Green has said, but we have got a plan, and I've got a very clear vision about how we are going to support the young people, and of course their parents and carers. So I'm very happy to bring that back to ONS as required.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Does anybody else have any questions or points? I'm just looking down my list. I can't see any more hands up at the moment. I'll just give them a moment to, just in case somebody's slow on the hand raise. No, in that case, I shall thank you both very much for that input. I know we found it very useful. Going on then to agenda item 8, the forward plan. Now, there's a couple of things on here. We did have an item on the Bournemouth Learning Centre conversion to special school campus on the agenda for tonight, which then got removed at quite a late date. That was due to it taking off the cabinet papers, and I believe it's going to be coming back later. I think some more work on having sight on it, and there's some more work on the figures and what the figures are was needed first before it could come through to us, because some questions that I know we have asked, the answers weren't there. So the answers are going to be found so we can ask them, I believe is the right way to look at it. There'll also be an information only report on BCP service complaints and representations, which will be coming to you by email shortly as well, rather than coming to the meeting. So any other comments on the forward plan from anybody? No, I'm not seeing any hands at all. Okay, in that case, meeting dates, the next meeting is the 23rd of March, and you probably noticed on the agenda, the meetings for next year have been added on as well. So I hope that is helpful. In that case, I declare the meeting's closed. Thank you very much for attending.